Blogger Lauren Quinn is the founder of the $35 Challenge, which is running for the second year as part of Anti-Poverty Week, which went from the 14th to the 20th of October this year. This challenge requires participants to live on $35 for all their food and drink for 1 week, with the rest of their usual budget being donated to Food Bank Australia. Lauren came up with the idea after recalling how hard she struggled during her years as a student.
Basically, I got involved because I came up with the idea. I came up with the idea as a result of my own experience as a student. So when I was a student, $35 was about how much money I had to spend after I had paid for my public transport, rent and bills. And then basically, when I looked back on that time, I was sort of thinking, well, how did I manage that? That was pretty tough. I don't think I could do that again. And that's kind of how the idea started, because I thought, well, yeah, I'll have a go at it again and we'll see if we can do something with this. Also this week, I paid a visit to the Vincentian House, which is a women's and families refuge and crisis centre in the inner city of Sydney. And we're talking about setting up some workshops where we can sort of show people how to budget better and buy cheaper groceries, because the thing about living in extreme poverty or crisis is that food basically becomes a discretionary spending item. It's not something that you really can budget the same amount for every week, and that really impacts on how much you have to spend generally. So basically your main cost is housing, and then apart from that, everything else is optional.
Catherine McCallum is the National Liaison Officer for the Anti-Poverty Week organisation. She explains what they hope to achieve.
Poverty Week is to raise awareness of poverty and hardship in Australia and overseas in the local community. So when reforms are brought forward, such as the new National Disability Insurance Scheme or an increase to the New Start allowance, for example, there's greater public support and less opposition to such reforms.
What kind of events happen?
Oh, there's a huge range of events. We have big events that are sort of forums and that sort of thing, where we get a lot of prominent speakers, right down to sort of backyard sausage sizzles, which might be fundraising for a local charity. So we really encourage everyone to get involved in whatever way they can.
One event held as part of Anti-Poverty Week was a presentation by the Food Fairness Alliance. Speakers including Jerry Anderson, CEO of Food Bank, and Greens MP Jeremy Buckingham discussed food security.
That's what we're focusing on this evening, is about why it is that still in 2012, with Australia apparently the lucky country, apparently creating so much food we can export bucket loads of it overseas, but we're still failing to feed and adequately and properly feed so many of our own population. And the impacts of that are really devastating, both in terms of short and long-term health consequences and other consequences, which will be drawn up by some of our speakers later on.
A report released at the beginning of Anti-Poverty Week this year by the Australian Council of Social Service says that despite 20 years of economic growth, poverty has increased in Australia. Under the changes passed in the Senate last week, over 100,000 sole parents on the parenting payment will be between $60 and $100 a week poorer from January 2013. The report shows that almost 300,000 children living in poverty are with sole parents. The New Start payment has not been increased in almost 20 years, even though 2/3 of people on New Start have been unemployed for more than a year. Greens councillor Irene Doutney agrees that the inadequacy of Centrelink payments have a direct impact on poverty in Australia. Irene was born and raised in Sydney's King's Cross, where she and her family lived in very poor circumstances. Having overcome many challenges, she is now a public housing tenant in Redfern, as well as being the Greens representative on the City of Sydney Council.
They're really difficult problems to deal with, because sometimes you don't even know what's going on, and it's huge. And the number of people I know who are lucky enough to be housed in public housing do have a lot of issues in terms of buying food. So they, like me, I know people who only eat once a day.
This is Kate Burgess for Study Break.